Hey y'all, it's Crystal. Thanks so much for coming by today. I just kind of want to do a book chat about a book I recently read, and because it really kind of affected me, and I just kind of want to ramble some thoughts out about it. Like usual, my book chats are a bit rambly. Probably I do have some notes, but I'm just going to kind of talk about how I feel about this book, really. I don't remember how this book got on my radar, but it'd been on my list for a little while, and it's a short book, so I was in the mood where I was looking for something short to listen to. I did listen to the audiobook, and yeah, it was, I don't know, 6 hours. It was a short one, and I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into. didn't quite get. I didn't. Wasn't quite prepared. So the essential story, as we follow, Harriet and David, as in the beginning of the book, they're meeting at a work party, and they decide that they get together, la la la, and get married, and they talk about their life together. They're both a bit eccentric as far as the time period. The time, even though it was written in the 80s, the time period is actually the 1960s. And so they're not into this sort of excessive sex that's going around and all that kind of good stuff. They're not like other people, essentially. They're a little snooty too, but so they get together. They plan to have lots of children, even though people aren't really having lots of children these days. But that's their plan. They want to have 6, 7, 8 children. And so they start their life together. They buy this big house and all that good stuff. So life starts for them. They have several children. They have 4 children pretty consecutively. It's like, get on the brakes, bud. But anyway, and then she's pregnant again with the 5th child. And this one, it just feels different right away for Harriet. She is lots of, like, the fetus itself is like moving quite like violently in her stomach, and lots of pain for Harriet. And of course, her doctor doesn't believe her when she talks about how this one just feels differently, and they're like, oh, just you're fine. Okay, that's fun. She has to basically take tranquilizers because she's in such excruciating pain. And then the baby is born, and right away you could tell it looks different. It was a big baby. It's like 11-pound baby, and it looks differently. It just has facial features are definitely different, and it is even as an infant, as a newborn, it's very strong. They named the baby Ben, and Harriet immediately calls Ben a troll or a goblin. Like, that's what it looks like. Okay, the baby, like I said, the baby itself does act different just right away, and the feeling is that it's evil. Like, there's something evil about this baby, right? This book is sort of touted as a horror book, and I think it plays into those things of kind of Rosemary's Baby kind of stuff, where is this the devil reincarnate, or is this kid was born evil, all that kind of stuff. And there are things that happen after Ben is brought home that are like, that you're kind of questioning. Is Ben evil? Is he doing these things? Did he kill the family dog? I don't know. I'm not saying. I don't know. But and a lot of the 4 other kids are just really, like, not jazzed. Really not connecting with the baby. The father, David, absolutely abhors the baby. Is really just not a fan. Really doesn't like the baby from the get-go. Harriet tries her best. I mean, she really is trying to be a mother to Ben, even though Ben makes it hard for her. I mean, he starts walking at like 6 months or something. I mean, I'm telling you, it is a little freaky. Ben himself is a little freaky, right? His behavior is just different, right? His behavior is just not right. He's weird, right? um, excuse me. So, what I I think I was going into this story as like an evil kid story, right? And if you look at it, I think at that surface, you get an evil kid story. And that's what you get from the story. And if that's what you want from the story, that's what you'll get from it. Um, there's a lot of layers in this story, though. I will say, if you want to delve deep into it, and that's kind of what I'm going to try to do today. Again, I'm just going to ramble some thoughts here, but um, there is definitely some, commentary here about motherhood in general, right? Um, that strive for perfection that a lot of mothers feel. And so once, Ben was born and he wasn't, quote unquote, normal, Harriet felt guilt and, she felt blame. She felt, there was even a line where she says that she felt like a criminal because she, birthed Ben and, tried to raise him up and all that kind of good stuff. There's also this pressure, this societal pressure and sort of familial pressure that, families get of having, again, just having this perfect family. And there's one quote here that I wrote down. And this is from Harriet's mom. Now, I will say Harry and David, they're a bit upper class. They're not like wealthy, like crazy rich people, but they're not poor folks. You know what I mean? And their parents help them out a lot, and with financially and things like that. And so they have means, is what I'm saying. That's it. They're kind of upper middle class, right? And so Harriet's mother, that gets to a point. Ben is about 2 or 3, and it's just wild. The house is wild. He is violent. He is extremely violent. He screams a lot. It's just he's hard to handle, hard to control. And again, he just looks differently, and people are just really uncomfortable around him. Other family members stop coming around for visits. They host like holidays at the house because their house is so big. So like, Christmas and Easter and summer things, where like, cousins and aunts and everyone would come visit. That stops happening, that kind of thing. So even the familial support just stops after Ben is born. And so Harriet's mom right here says, he meaning Ben, he's normal for what he is. He's not normal for what we are. And that hit me like a fucking ton of bricks. Because that line is stemming from this conversation that Harriet's mom is having with Harriet and David, who David is in concurrence to send Ben to an institution. So this would be probably, I guess it's probably maybe the early 70s now, 1970s, that this kind of timeline is taking place, because she's had the 4 kids already. So yeah, I would say 1970s this is happening. And this thought about the institution, right? Because that's what you did with the kids that you didn't want, right? And this is what like gave me a knot in my stomach. And when I say that, I was like, oh God, I was like, oh man, I don't know. I'm not liking the direction this is going. But I said, like, I almost DNF'd it. But I feel like I need to see this book through. This is when I need to see it through. I'm glad I did, but, and they make the decision and they take Ben to an institution, and, they come and get him and take him there. And then, this is, I guess, slightly spoilery, but, so skip ahead if you don't want a spoilery, but, when I say that I don't trigger easily, and I really don't, nothing really, things make me uncomfortable, things make me, but it's nothing I would say really triggers me until I read this scene when Harriet is like, she's feeling really guilty, she's feeling sad, she wants to go visit Ben in the institution. So she goes to the institution. And what she sees there is awful. It's awful. There's so many other babies and children there that are just kept in abhorrent conditions because they all look differently, you know what I mean? They all have some level of disfigurement or whatever, right? And then Ben is locked so in this room by himself in a straitjacket and is basically tranquilized, kept what's the word I'm looking for? Kept under medicine. What you know what I'm trying to say? Because he is extremely violent and he's very strong. And that entire scene was so hard to read. And maybe it's just me. I know I bring my own personal baggage when I read books, particularly about children, particularly about children with disabilities. But this was fucking hard for me to read. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And why? Well, because that's what people do with kids with disabilities back then. So, and this is very, very true, and it happens very much up until pretty recently, and even now you still find grown adult people with say adults with Down syndrome living in not necessarily but mental homes or care facilities, and because their families dumped them there when they were young. Because basically, for me, the heart of this story is, excuse me, is that you have your idea of what your life is going to look like, right? And society tells us this is what our life is going to look like, right? We're going to get married, we're going to buy the big house. And for Harriet David, they were planning on having lots of children until that one child came along that wasn't in their scope of what they had envisioned. It wasn't in their bubble, right? And Ben was outside of their bubble. And so how do we deal with this? And so in the time period of that 1960s, 70s, up into the 80s and 90s, kids were often dumped in institutions, and they were the most abhorrent, disgusting conditions, and it was awful. It was very awful. I will try to link an article below if you're interested in learning about the history of these types of institutions, because these things existed in real life here in the US, here in the UK. You even see it now in other countries, particularly you see a lot in China, you see a lot in Eastern Europe, even some South American countries where children with disabilities are sent to orphanages. It happens. It still happens today. And that scene, it was hard for me. It was very hard for me. What was interesting though was that Harriet did bring Ben home, and she's like, you know what, this is not. I can't leave him here because he was going to die there. Basically, I mean, there's no question, and so she brings Ben home, and that decision absolutely fractures the family. Her children, her other 4 children, as they're getting older, they're kind of, some of them are kind of early teens and that kind of thing. None of them, no one wants Ben there. The father doesn't want them there. The other kids don't want him there. People don't understand. They don't understand why she brought him home. And Harriet even tells David, if I left him there, he would have died. And David says to her face, wasn't that the point? What? It's hard to read. It's hard to read this book. But anyway. Yeah, so she brings Ben home from this institution. Again, this is slightly spoilery. I'm sorry. David becomes very resentful towards Harry, and their relationship changes, of course, as it does. But he's very resentful. The other kids, like I said, they don't want to be there. A couple of them end up leaving to go to boarding school because they're old enough to do so. They just don't want to be there, and it's just Harriet. I mean, Harriet really tries to make everything work. I mean, she really does. She does get to a point with Ben where he calms down some, he's less violent, that kind of thing. She does really well with him. She even sends him to school, once he gets in school age and stuff like that. She tries. I mean, she does really, really try. So Harriet, really feels like she has ruined the family because that she saved Ben, and she's, asked, like, is she being punished? And you feel this because they wanted to be better than other people, right? They had this plan of their life, and it just didn't work out, which I think a lot of us can, really identify with that, because life usually doesn't work out the way you plan, and it's fine, but you know what I mean? You have to roll with the punches, right? And what I also found super interesting was that once Ben comes back to the family, he gets a bit older. He also, once he kind of learns this, that he doesn't need to scream and shout and everything, he also tries really hard to fit in. He tries to sit with his younger, the older brother, the next oldest brother, whatever, one of his brothers, Peter. He tries to sit and watch TV with him, and things like that. He tries. He sits down and eats dinner with everyone, and he really tries. He's very much sort of trying to play this role to fit in with his family, and you can see he tries really hard, like he really does. But the family still just doesn't really accept him, and really in general. Eric questions that, if I left him in the institution and Ben had died, would my family be in a better place right now? Would we be happy? Again, that guilt, that absolute guilt that she feels as a mother, as a parent in general, it's palpable. It's very palpable in this story. So for me, I think a lot of you know by now, and you're probably sick of me even talking about it, but my child is disabled. My child has Down syndrome and autism. And, our life is different, right? Which is fine. Some days are hard, some days are not. Our life is just life. I don't know. We just roll with the punches. One thing I've learned is you just gotta roll with it. You just gotta roll with it. And I'm happy for that. I'm happier for that. Learning to just roll with it, right? But for me, this story brought back so many of those feelings that I had in the early days. After my son was born and we got the diagnosis of the absolute, the gamut, the range of feelings that I personally had, a lot of those that Harriet felt, when you first, see that your child is not normal, right? Is different, and automatically the life that you planned is not, right? I mean, and this is just truth. This is just me speaking truth here. Those early days, I was really sad. I was very angry, and it was tough. It's tough, because it just, it was like a knock. It was like it came out of nowhere. We weren't expecting this. No one really expects this, right? But of course he's 10 now, so of course we're in emotionally, in a much better place. But reading this book really just brought back some of those feelings that I remember from the early days. The early days were a bit dark sometimes. I'll be honest here. But he was a wonderful baby. But anyway, he was sweet. But and then to me, it's that pressure that we have to have these perfect children, to offer the world these perfect children, and that the mothers, of course, feel so much guilt when that doesn't happen. And for me, that was very, very much, very palpable for this story, as far as the emotions that I felt while reading this. It was very much there for me. And then, we see Ben trying to make his way through the world, because towards the end of the book, he's like kind of like a teenager, and he's like running this gang at school. I mean, he's it's kind of great. You see how he's reacting to his world, because he knows that he's different. I mean, he knows this, right? And I know there's a part 2 to this book. I may try to check it out. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's about Ben now, as like an adult. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this story, I think, about motherhood in general. Because if you're looking, if you want a story that's about, about the not always, pretty side of motherhood, I think this is great. Also, I think about having that non-perfect kid, that non-perfect family when life throws you a curveball, and then how people react to you. Because you will notice, if you have a child with a disability, you will notice that some friends don't come around anymore, things like that. You lose people, and it's very noticeable. And that also really struck a chord with me in this book, because her family really just abandons Harriet. They just stop coming around. And that's actually very, very true. And then, of course, the whole institutionalization of kids with disabilities, adults with disabilities during this time period, is a very dark history that we have, and it's awful, and it's sad, and it makes me want to cry. And I guess I'm really just glad that my son was born when he was born, because things are different now. Things are still hard. People still really look down on people with disabilities. I'm by no means looking through rose-colored lenses here, but things are better, I think, sort of in general, right? Still a long way to go, like usual, but throwing kids in institutions isn't usually considered an option these days, particularly here in the U.S., and I would say probably in the U.K. also. So those are some rambling thoughts I have about this book. It was very affecting to me. It really was. It was powerful. It was really wonderfully written, I thought. I thought Doris Lessing did a wonderful job with portraying these characters, this story, this level of emotion from Harriet as a mother. Also, really, it was a bit horrific at times with Ben's behavior, and what is Ben? We still don't really know necessarily. Is he a troll? Really? I don't know. I don't think so. But is he evil? I don't know. I think definitely leaves you to make those kind of answer those questions yourself by the end. But I think for the raw emotion, and that idea of just what that perfect family should be, all that was tackled so well in this book. And yeah, so I liked it, though it was extremely hard for me to read, and I'm glad I read it, honestly. I really am. So I thought it's a good book. It's a good book. I would read it for sure. But if you're a mother, particularly if you're a mother of a disabled child, just protect your heart a little bit going into it. But I would say it's worth a read, honestly. Even as a parent of a disabled child, I thought it was really good, very effective, and yeah, it's good stuff. I'm gonna just say it's good stuff. This video's a bit long now, so I'll leave it there. Let me know, have you read this book? How did it make you feel? Did you come away with, what did you come away feeling about this book? I'd like to know. Or are you interested in reading it now? I think it's absolutely worth a read. And yeah, so I'll leave it here. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time, and bye.